recording. Okay, it is March 5th. This is going to go under pre-market trading, post-market trading, and it's also going to go under SEC filings, and it's also going to go under the introduction section, the 101 section of just trading, introduction to trading. So it'll be in 3 different spots. All right, so what we're going to go over is how to find Momo stocks and play them correctly. And you do this during pre-market. And so a lot of people ask me, how do you know which ones to play and which ones not to play? So like a friend of mine, he was looking at SRNE, and he asked me, hey, you don't like SRNE today? And I said, no, I don't like it. And he tried playing it twice and lost. And he didn't understand why SRNE the news wasn't good enough for them to go versus something else. And so it's very important to be able to understand the news, to be able to interpret it, and to be able to look at a chart and say, hey, this is going to have some type of impact. Let's play. All right. So here, let's start out how to find Momo stocks and play them correctly. So first things first, you want to be able to identify morning movers. Okay. So you can do that in a number of ways. I have my trade ideas up all the time, and it's over here in this left-hand corner of my screen. So you'll watch here. I'll pull up my my trade ideas scanner and I'll show it to you. But all you're doing is you want to see what's gapping up. Let me pull up this pre-market scanner here. I'm gonna have to close the current windows on Windows, close all, load layout, pre-market. So you can see if you zoom in on this left-hand screen, so what it's going to show you is up gappers here, down gappers. So up gappers here, down gappers here, and then stocks up big in pre-market. You're going to see these. This is going to be moving, okay? And so you'll see. Let's just pretend like you see EYEI, like you see it hit like 4, 5, 6, 7 times in a row. Well, it's consistent buying, and so we need to look at it and see if there's news. And so you can get the news immediately within 1 minute of when it comes out, because you'll see it start scrolling on the screen. Okay. If you don't want to look at this and you want to wake up at 6 o'clock or whatever, or 9 o'clock and not really pay attention to what's going on pre-market, you can use websites such as MarketWatch. They'll have them all on there. Here, I'm going to close these windows out and put back up the so once you identify market movers, you want to check and see if the news is fluff news or something that could push the stock. Then you want to identify the float, and then you want to check the SEC filings and then create your thesis. Okay. So here, let's go through this process. This is the process. Take a picture of it, and we're just going to run through it real quick. Okay. Now, you identify morning movers. Many ways to find morning movers. Like I said, brokers have scanners. I use trade ideas. And you can also use free sites like marketwatch.com. They'll give you after hours gainers, after hours losers, and pre-market gainers and pre-market losers. Once you do that, you go through the news and you want to say, you know what? Is this just fluff news, or is this fundamental? Is it going to change something fundamentally with a company? Examples would be a new contract. So, excuse me, let me ask you a question. Today, if we look at eyes had news. Does anybody know what the news was on eyes? Mitzi, I just see your question. Absolutely. Here. So Mitzi's question was, can you share? So if you have trade ideas, Mitzi, here, I will share this this layout. Share. Yeah, just Mitzi, can you remind me? Can you just remind me at the end of this lesson, and I'll post that in there. Okay. So the news on eyes was they got FDA approval. So FDA approval is like legit, right? So the question becomes, this is fundamental news. Are they going to push it? Is it a sell the news, right? So what you do is you go and you look at the chart. So if eyes had been up here, if it had pushed into this, maybe it's a sell the news event, right? But we had dipped down and sold off, and now we're popping up. So it's important to be able to look at a chart and see where we are in relation to, could this be a sell the news event, or is it going to be a pop? And the same thing with earnings, right? So when you look at earnings, then if we push really into earnings, you may crush earnings, but it may sell off. And so it's important to understand where we came from to be able to determine whether this is going to push or not. Now, fundamental change is going to increase, decrease revenue, expenses, change of management, being trumped. That was when Trump was president. Maybe I should take that out. Trump would often jump on Twitter and say something negative about a company. So, are positive, you know. All right, once you do that, you want to identify the float, okay? So can anybody tell me what the float is? Does anybody know what the float is? Somebody type it in. What is the float? Because float is often mistaken. So float versus outstanding shares, you guys got it. Dan says how many shares available to trade, right? Total amount of shares available to trade. Well, outstanding is the float plus the restricted shares. Okay, so if the float is small, it's easier to manipulate. An example of that is eyes. Does anybody have the float on eyes today? So one of the stocks that's moving today is eyes. Does anybody know the float? Has anybody traded eyes? Because if you've been trading eyes, you need to know the float. All right, so you're saying 13.2 mil. So my question is, where do you get that information from? Where did you get that information, Zach and Dan? So you guys got that off of FinViz, right? Yeah, that's where most people go and get their float. The most accurate place to get your float would be where, guys? For all of you that know this already. SEC filings. That's right. Yep. You go to SEC filings, and that's where you're going to find your float. I did a quick look this morning on it, and I came up with, I think it was, we had an argument whether it was 13.5 or whether it was 19.5. But I was playing it with a 19.5 float. So you identify the float, and then you try to ride the whale, right? Or the axe. You know, you can call it the axe, you can call it the whale, but that means that's the person that is in control. That's the big wig that's controlling the stock. And the goal for the company is always to make more money, right? Now, I'm going to go through this with this one, but we're also going to refer back to eyes. So you always want to check the SEC filings, and you want to check for what's called overhead, what I call overhead supply. Okay. What is overhead supply? That is anything that allows you to sell into the spike, to create shares out of thin air. Now, do you guys remember when we were playing socket, or not socket, SKT? What did I show you on SKT? What did SKT have? It had an ATM. That's right. This eyes, it's they really trap these shorts. They've done this a couple times really well here to push this. And this eyes, it's good. I guess it's good that we're doing this today because this is a good chart to show how manipulation happens. I shorted this up here. I covered at 270. Let me see. 271.5 is where my cover was here. It looked like they were starting to absorb. And do you see these? Do you see how everybody underneath these levels are trapped, right? They created new lows, but look, they immediately pushed and just chewed right through it. So what this is shorts covering. Shorts were like, oh, okay, we're breaking down. Here we go, crap. They trapped us, right? And you can see this is done a number of times. So they did the same thing here. Did you see how they bring it up? They trap the shorts, they push it up. Somebody is in control of this float and they're using shorts to push this. And and somebody asked, hey, what do you mean by trapping? So they're making you think this is breaking down. So here, right here, as a short seller, you're like, all right, if we can get this underneath this point of control, right, underneath this 360, we'll probably come down here to 322. So that'll be your first cover. And there it is, right? This is your shorts covering. And then it becomes, all right, if we break that, it's over. But we could never break it. And so anybody that didn't cover is immediately trapped up by this. And you can all see that. You see how you can see this real well on VP here, right? Boom, boom. If it breaks that, it's over. Didn't break, we trap. All right. Man, I'm tempted to trade this. I'm not going to trade. I'm going to go through the you got a lot of shorts trapped in here, so it could really go parabolic because here and this is a good point, good time to show you the dilution on eyes. Again, I use dilutiontracker.com. I trust this website. You should learn how to read the filings, and we'll go through that in a minute. But if you look at eyes, what kind of dilution do you guys see on eyes? Do you guys see any dilution that we should be worrying about? Does anybody see any dilution on eyes that we should be worrying about? So Mitzi says warrants. What's the warrants price, Mitzi? $11.76, right? Should we be worried about that right now? Does that factor into play at all? No. No, we're not up there, right? Right? So all the shorts right now are saying, man, is this another trap? Are they trapping again to push it higher? Should I short? This is the breakdown, you know? And so right now, this isn't a big deal. 11.76. What about this shelf? Should we be worried about this shelf? Because they could drop an offering in the midday if it has a shelf, right? So should we be worried about this shelf? David E says expired. It's gonzo. That's right, right? It's expired. So shelves last for how long? How long does a shelf last? It lasts 3 years. This was filed in 2017. 2020 is the end. They don't have a new shelf up yet. That doesn't mean they can't throw one up tomorrow or the next day, right? But as of now, it's expired. 2017 is when it was issued. All right. So there is absolutely no overhead that we have to worry about. Zero. That's why this is a good long. And that's why if you look right here, what did I say? Eyes gets FDA approval. It's under baby shelf. Warrants at $11. Not a big deal. Did I include the shelf? No shelf, right? So max raise is 3 mil. Because they are under baby shelf, the max that they can raise right now is $3 million. And we'll go through how to figure all that out later. So as of now, eyes, there is absolutely no worry of overhead. Okay. So does everybody understand that? Because that's key. It's in alerts. If you go up to alerts, Irina, it's the very last alert above and you see how I said CLPS, it's got $6 warrants and an active shelf. That's just letting you know, hey, they can raise, right? So when I come in the morning, guys, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you, today I'm a lighter trade. I trade lighter today on Fridays, but on Mondays, you'll see like, I may put 10 of these in here. Hey, this small float, this, and this, right? And so just the only thing that I was really looking at small floats today were these. Let's see, Jim says, with no overhead, we're looking for people to sell because they have been in the red. So is that how you look at it? Jim, that goes to a chart analysis, right? So on eyes, the point that you bring up is very valid, right? But what you want to do is you want to look at, your recent. You'd want to look at your recent positions, right? And say, you know what? I mean, recent history. So you say, you know what? Yeah, there's some bag holders here, right? So chart wise, there's some bag holders here. But if we get over that, you may find another little resistance here. But above that, there's not much resistance. And so then we come to today's candle, and do you see how it like we drew those lines before we even looked at this? Do you see how it played against these levels? So you're right? We sold into those bag traders, right? It still found buyers. We sold into those bag traders. We still found buyers, and it went. So yeah, what I put for the short room, as I said, hey, this is bag levels. This is bag levels. We get over this, we're going to get a push. So yeah, you're right, but that doesn't have to do anything with filings. It just has to do with the chart. When we come to filings, what overhead is, it's just paper. They're creating shares out of thin air. There's no shares there. They press a button, and now there's shares there, and they get to keep the money. Does that make sense, Jim? So Dan says, are VP lines not as relevant on these because it does not take as much volume to burst up or down with a low float? I'm always nervous that these things could shoot up or down $1 to $2 in just a few seconds and get blown up. All right, so Dan, what I would say to that is you're trading it too big. You're trading it too big, right? Instead of trading 1,000 shares, maybe trade 100. Okay. But your answer to that question is volume is everything, right? So do you remember, and we'll get into this a little bit, we're kind of jumping ahead, but do you remember what the float was on eyes? How much have we traded today? Right now we're at 262 million, right? So here, let's bring out the calculator. Do you remember what we said the float was? So let's just pretend it's 13, right? And so if we divide that by 13 mil, we have traded 20 times float. Good idea, Efren. So yeah, we've traded the entire float 20 times. So what does that mean? Anybody and everybody that was trapped has had ample opportunity to get out, right? So yeah, Efren, I'm kind of torn between playing this eyes and just going on with the lesson, but you're right. I need to go on with the lesson. So overhead supply is simply dilution. Dilution is increasing shares of the company. Examples are warrants, convertible notes, and offerings. Longs is low overhead, right? So we didn't see much overhead on eyes. That's why it's a long. Shorts is high amounts of overhead. That's why we were looking at SKT as a short, right? And a perfect example of that was they had 250 mil on this, and this was popping up. I saw them starting to unload this at 25 in pre-market yesterday. You could see huge chunks of shares start going off, like 75,000, 75,000, 52,000. You were seeing huge chunks just being sold into. And this is what an ATM does, is it increases the supply and they just sell into any pops. Okay, so that's a good chart for overhead versus non-overhead, right? See the difference? All right. You find SEC filings, for those of you watching the video, at Edgar, right? You should have a bookmark. It's sec.gov. You come in here and you can look up any ticker, right? You click on company filings right here and put in your ticker, and it's going to bring up all of their filings, right? So this is the official place. You can also use something called BAMSEC. It's easier to search through. It's easier to find. If you're big into this and you get used to reading these things, you're going to want to use BAMSEC. I use both, but BAMSEC's just easier to search. And then you create your thesis, right? Always leave room to be wrong. Maybe eyes has overhead that I missed. You know what I mean? Maybe we don't get the volume that we need, right? But you create your thesis and stick to your plan. So for me, these plays are called pump and dumps or pumps. You know, this was on my watch list whenever this went. When was this? April 2020. I put in, hey, CYCC did a reverse split. It now only has 860,000 shares total. Super nano float. Only burns about 650 per month. So it's got plenty of cash for a while. However, S1A filed on 4/14. So what an S1A is it's an amendment to the S1. And what that means is they sent in the S1 to the SEC. The SEC sent them back and said, hey, these changes need to be made. And then they make those changes and resend it back to the SEC. And so that means that's the S1A. And so when you see an amendment, that's just them fixing the problems, right? And Roth, so probably a pump's on the way. Roth, there's a bunch of companies that are shady, H.C. Wainwright. And so literally what happened within a couple days, we shot this sucker up and then we shorted it all the way back down. So we caught this from, $6 to 20, and then we shorted it from like 20 back to 4, right? So they can be extremely, extremely. Let me delete this since this is no longer valid. All right. These can be extremely profitable once you learn how to play them. Okay. So let me pull up, see if there's any questions. Can you slower talk through the math? Irina, yeah, which math? Are you talking about the float math? So the float, yeah, so all you do for the float is, so you take I's, so the total amount of the float today is 273 million, right? So all you're doing is looking at your total float. I mean, your total amount traded, your total volume, all right? And so all you do is you put in total volume, 275 million, and then you take the float of the company. So in this instance on I's, it's 13 mil, right? So you divide that by 13.5, well, divided by, and that's going to give you, well, I was off there. It gives you 20, right? So 13.5 million times 20 gives you the 270 million that we traded. So that means every single share that can be traded has been traded 20 times on ICE. So the float has rotated 20 times. So the other thing that you do, especially with these nano floats, it's sometimes it gets so powerful that the float is traded every 3 or 4 or 5 minutes. So here, let's just go to a 15-minute chart on ICE. They're just holding this thing. 34 million traded here. The entire float traded in 15 minutes. 25 million here. The entire float has already traded, right? And so when you go back and you look and you're like, all right, so 7 mil here, 9 mil here. So in the past 10 minutes, the entire float has been traded on ICE in the past 10 minutes, right? So there's two ways to look at this, right? We don't want to be stuck under everybody, but they keep soaking this. This is why I wanted to play this, right? And so this is a, where do you see how much has been traded today? So do you have, what broker do you use? Any broker that you use, you just click on that. And if you're looking here, let me see if I can, for me, all the information is going to be over here and volume should be about right there. So if I click, so do you see where I've, you see where it says in red volume 280 million? That's your total amount. It's just the, yeah, it's just the volume. You know, on any, just look at your daily, it's just the volume traded today. That's all it is. So what should have happened here, guys, is you should have had a push. This should have pushed right here. All right, so let's get back to the training. All right, so let's put this process into a real life example. What I did in the presentation was a bio had gapped up and was on everyone's scanner. They had come out with a treatment for COVID-19. Identified the float was 1.5 mil. It had low overhead and it was mixed with the baby shelf rule. We'll go into baby shelf a little bit more, but it was going for, I said, hey, this is going for a high close in order to raise more according to the baby shelf rule. That was the thesis that I had put together. And so let me explain the baby shelf rule real quick. A registrant with a public float of less than 75 million may sell under Form S3 during any 12-month period securities having an aggregate market value of not more than 1/3 of the public float of such registrant. So all that means is, what's your total value of your company? If it's under 75 million, you are limited by the baby shelf. What this does is it stops companies from continuing dilution, and it's to try to protect the investor. How do you calculate the public float? There's two ways. It's the highest close the last 60 days plus bid-ask average of the past 60 days. Now, this baby float rule is kind of tricky. There's a lot of ins and outs to it. So study it on your own. I'm going to give you the high points here. All right. If we look at eyes, is eyes limited underneath the baby shelf rule before today? So we're just going to use today's example on eyes. All right. How did I know that eyes was underneath baby shelf rule? Again, I trust this guy. I know this guy. I trade with him, the guy that runs this website. So what you would do is you identify the float. See, he has the float at 12.5 or 12.6, right? Is it restricted by baby shelf? Yes, it is. Well, why? Well, this IB6 float value, that's what that means, because that's the rule. It's IB6. That's the rule, the baby shelf rule. So all you do is you take your total amount of shares, 12, 5, 9, 1, 8, 8, 4, right? And what was the highest close in the last 60 days? It was 263 times 263, and that gives you 3311655. Is that under 75 million? Is 33 million less than 75 million? Yes. So it's under baby shelf. All right. Now, this will be, here's an interesting one for all you veterans. Anant, I want to know if you know this. Let me pull it up real quick. I'm putting Anant on the spot here. Anant, can you see this right here? So look, float 29 million, highest close 235, IB6 float value 69 million. So is that under 75 million? Yes. Is it limited by baby shelf? Anant, will that one be limited by baby shelf? Now, this is kind of a trick question, so I'll be interested to see what you say. What do you think, Anant? Well, the answer's on there. Here, hold on. I gotta do something real quick if I'm gonna show you. All right, you ready, Anant? We're gonna put Anant on the spot here. All right. This right here, would this company be limited by baby shelf? And let's see what he said. What's the answer? Yes, he says yes. Getting the numbers, yes. Okay. So let me show you what Dilution Tracker has now, right? The answer's on there. That's what I said. So this is why you need to make sure you understand baby shelf. The correct answer that Anant should have put, and the reason it was a trick question is, I don't have enough information to tell you. What ticker is it? He needs to look at what ticker this is, because the rule on the baby shelf is if you've climbed out of baby shelf in the past year, in the past 12 months, you're out. Right? And so they had been over, and so they were out. They were out of baby shelf. They filed for the S3 while they were out of baby shelf, so they're not limited by it. So again, study baby shelf on your own. Make sure you understand it completely. But this particular is just this is an odd example. It doesn't happen very often. Most of the time when you're under baby shelf, you've been under baby shelf. So I'm gonna, did eyes trap again? I'm gonna see if eyes is trapping again. Look at this. Look at this. They're just trapping. Okay, back to training. It was a trick. It was a trick question, and um, you know, so it's important to understand everything, right? He didn't have all the information. He couldn't have told me if it was a trick question because I led him into it, right? If you're under 75 mil, you're under baby shelf. Then I ask him, hey, this company's under 75 mil. Well, of course you're going to say no. I mean, yes, it is, but you have to go back and look at the past year and see if it's gotten out of it. So that's just a tidbit, right? So make sure you understand baby shelf rule completely. So this was ABIO's SEC page. Do you see that they had an effect right here for the S3 that was filed? Type a 2 in if you do not know what an effect is. Does everybody understand the effect? No. Okay, we don't understand an effect. Okay. So the way that if you watch my common dilutions video, it talks about it a little bit, but when you file an S3 or an S1, you have to get what's called an effect. An effect is literally filed by the SEC. What that means is this company sent in this S3 and they said, you know what, we're wanting to put in a shelf registration. And the SEC looks at that and says, hey, this filing is good. Here's the effect. We're giving you the effect. That means it can be used. So a lot of times you'll see an S1, right? And then you'll see an S1A, and then you'll see the effect. Well, what that means is they sent in the S1, right, to the SEC. The SEC said, you got to fix some things. They sent it back to them. And then they sent back the S1A with the amendment. And then the SEC sent them the effect and said, okay, you're good. You're good now. You can use this. Everything's been filed legally correctly. It's all good. Okay. So that's what the effect is. Once the effect is live, that means they can raise off of that S3. Okay. So this effect, if we were to click on it, it's going to pull up this S3 and show you how much they can raise. All right. So effect on S3, shelf registration. Now, do you see this S1? There's no effect on it. So this one's not in play. It can't be, it doesn't matter right now. So we shouldn't long this one, right? Maybe we should short, right? Because they have an S3 and they have an effect. That means they have a baby shelf and they can raise. So newbie shorters, they're like, oh, you know what? They've got a shelf. They're gonna raise. Blah 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 blah. So I got a question here. It says, question here. S1 then S3. What does it mean? So, Irina, I'm pretty sure we have this one uploaded, but I'm going to talk with Efren this weekend, and we're going to get the website more organized and kind of how I want it, so I'll know where everything is. But it's if you look at my video of common forms of dilution, I go through it a little bit in more detail. But the difference here is an S3 is a shelf registration. What that means is if we put in a shelf, this is that shelf. Let me delete these. So this is that shelf here. S3 is always a shelf, and they call it a shelf because it's just sitting on a shelf being ready to be used. So you see how it says 75 million right here? So it says from time to time we may offer and sell up to 75 million. Well, what this means is they can raise off this S3 and they get somebody to buy, and let's say they raise 25 million. Okay. Whoops, 25 million. Well, how much is left on this shelf? Well, you just subtract 25 mil from that. There's still 50 million that you can raise. And so when I come into my buddy's site and I come into dilution tracker and I'm like, all right, let me pull up this one. So do you see here how it says total shelf capacity is 40 million? And then you see how it says current raisable amount is 24? Well, that means that they've already raised 16 million, right? This is off of the S3, okay? So they've already raised 16 million. Do you see that right there? That's the difference, right? So that's what a shelf is. It's just there to be used whenever. Now, an S1 is very different. An S1 is a one-time deal. It's only once, and it's often used for like current investors, or they know, they have an idea of who's buying. They know exactly how much they want, and so they'll file an S1, and that's because they know that a raise is coming, how much, they've got all the details worked out. And an S1 doesn't go on the baby shelf. It doesn't. It's like a pipe. It's a pipe offering, private investment in public equity. So that's the difference. And you can study the difference in them. You can Google it or you can watch that video. But I hope that answers your question. And so everybody was looking at this S3 and thinking, yeah, let's let it run up and then short it because they're going to raise. Well, what they weren't looking at was, is ABio under baby shelf? And the answer to that question is, well, yeah. I mean, its float is 1.5 million. Now you find the highest close from the past 60 days, 4.86, multiply them, and this is your value, 7 million. So yeah, it's definitely under baby shelf, right? Well, do you remember the rule on the baby shelf? You could only raise 1/3 of your value of your company. So you guys tell me, before I flip to it, if the value of this company is 7,703,109, how do I figure out how much they can raise? Does anybody know? All right, we got multiplied by 3 and we got divide by 3. One of them is correct. Yeah. So Mitzi, you divide it, right? So you would divide this by 3 because per the baby shelf rule, right? Let's go back and read it. Right here, 1/3 of the public float of such registrant, right? So market value of not more than 1/3. So all we do is we go back and we divide this by 3. Right? Divided by 3, so that gives you 2.5 mil. So ABio can raise 2.5 mil within the past 12 months. So then your next step, guys, is you go in and you say, all right, well, how much has this company raised? Okay, and all you've got to do is look at 424s. So when you go to the Edgar website, put in the company name. Let me go back to. So if I go bio, this pulls up their page. If I wanted to look just for certain filings, all I'd have to do is type in 424, and it's going to bring up all their 424s, all their raises, right? And this is what it looks like. Okay. So you look at the filing date, you figure out how much was raised, look at the 424s and see what if the warrants were registered under what shelf to figure out, and then you add up the offerings, right? 7.6 or 763, and then 1 million. So you got basically 1.7 million that was raised already. And do you remember how much they can raise? 2.5. So that what's left? That's 800,000, right? So that's all that's doing for you. So the most ABio could raise at this point was 800,000, right? Does everybody understand that? So the last two raises that fell under the 12-month period, 1.7 minus the 1/3, which is 2.5 that we got, and that gives you 800,000. Is there any questions on that? How we got that? So I'm showing you how we do this with, I use Dilution Tracker as my cheat sheet because he does this for me, right? So he comes in, total amount raised under 12. So he's doing all this information for me, but you need to understand how to do it yourself and what and the point of it. So no questions on that? Okay, good. Oh man. So you see how this float's being manipulated? I mean, it's just locked. Somebody's locked the float. It's just, so we should have broken out here. We should have broken down here, but this is trapping. This is called trapping. It's just tough to trade as a short. And the volume flow was at, I think it was at like 80% within the first 20 minutes. And so the volume flow was long on it as well. All right. Let's see. So here's the Excel sheet that I used before I used Dilution Tracker. Take the float, take the close, get the value, what it can raise, how much it has raised, and then the ability to raise now, right? That's all that's in there. Plug it in, right? This is it. And then this is a bio, right? Ability to raise now. Is the company going to PR and push to raise $617,000? No. They usually push to raise at minimum a year. They're going to push, they're going to PR, they're going to put all this work into it. They're going to get a year's worth of cash. All right. And so this was the amount that they could raise before this PR and all of this stuff. Now I want to show you how much they can raise. Maybe I should take all these out. This was in a former chat room. But I was saying, hey, a bio will be fun today. These are my bread and butter plays. The higher the close, the better, blah, blah, blah. So look at what they did in one day. They were able to raise 617,000, but when the day closed, they're able to raise 8.2 million. I mean, how crazy is that, right? I need to take this out as well. Let's see. There we go. All right. So any questions on that? This is just chart reading a bio. We don't need to do that. I would rather go through and talk about pre-market. Any questions so far? No. Okay, good. So now let's go through the advantages and disadvantages, etc., pre-market and just chart reading in general. Yeah, it is a lot, David. And once you do it a few times, it becomes really easy. And you can use Dilution Tracker, but guys, you need to understand what's going on behind the scenes. Make sure you understand it all, because that's the key. Not how many weeks did you spend on this understanding it? I forgot, but you spent like 4, 5, 6 weekends just studying this, and just to get the concept. That's what's different. So Irina, here, let me pull that slide up again. Irina's question for everybody watching the video was, you said they could raise 600. Now they can actually raise 8 million. Well, where does that price come from? So do you remember the rule of the baby shelf? Under 75 million and 1/3, right? So as a 528 close, they actually closed this at 1921. Okay. So what's the float? It's 1.5. The float hasn't changed. Well, what's the value now? So before it was 7. Well, now the value is 30 million. Okay. So what could they raise before? 1/3, right? All you're doing is dividing 1/3 and 1/3. So 1/3 of 30 million is 10, right? How much have they raised? 2 million. That hasn't changed, right? Yes, exactly. Exactly, Irina. And I call this a type 1 play, right? It's a pump. And so they were trying to pump this. This is just a pump and dump. They're trying to pump it up so that they can raise, do an offering, and bring it down. And if you look at the one that I showed you, you see this one, CYCC? It was the same thing. And I mean, I can chart read through this ABIO real quick with you if you want. You can see what happened. And this goes into here. I'll do it with this, and then we can go over. So the Irina says, so ability to raise is not related to number of shares, just dollar value. Yes, exactly, Irina, exactly. It's your total value. Now, getting into pre-market, guys, most people are going to tell you do not trade pre-market and do not trade after hours. Can anybody tell me why? Why do most people tell you not to do that? Yeah, exactly. Very thin volume. Yeah, it's just low volume. You get jumps all around. You get all this and all that. Well, guess what, guys? Me being me, I was like, screw that. I love trading pre-market and after hours. I literally consider that an edge. I spent, I can't tell you how long, but at least 6 months just focusing on developing that edge of pre-market trading. Now, a few things that you're going to look for on pre-market trading is volume. You need to see volume, okay? If you get light volume, let's just say an average day's volume is 100 million for a stock. And in pre-market, it's traded a million. Well, guess what? In that first minute candle, that's really going to decide. You may be up $10. A good example of that today is Snow, or any big cap, because we had pushes this morning. So you see how we're pushing up, and everybody's like, "Oh, jobs reports, good news." Okay, yeah. Well, here's the real sentiment, right? Boom, straight down, right? But that's because of the amount of volume compared to the normal flow. If you look at eyes, a lot more volume compared to the normal float. So one thing that I track is volume traded pre-market. Okay, and to keep an eye on if you're maintaining good volume, a good number to remember is just 10 times amount. Okay, so let's just pretend if a company does 10 million trading in pre-market, they need to do 100 mil by the end of the day to continue that volume flow. If they're going to be under that, it's a good short. If they're going to be over it, it's a good long. Okay. You can also use the first hour as that and try to do like 3 times the first hour. People use different things for volume flow, but you can Google volume flow and read about it. But volume flow is just whether or not the volume is increasing per what's been trading or decreasing per what's been trading. So in the first, Mitzi asked for a repeat. So I keep track of what's traded in the pre-market. And so if a company is traded 10 million, I want it to be on target to trade 100 million, which is 10 times that by the end of the day. Okay. You can also use like 3 times that first hour. And there's another guy that I trade with. He runs a website. It's called Scripts to Trade. He has all these volume flows that you can buy. Everybody wants to sell you these indicators, but honestly, all they're doing for you is math. Okay, you can do it yourself, or you can buy the scripts. So 3 times that first hour, 10 times pre-market volume is kind of what I look for. If it's over it, I long. If it's under it, I short. Or if it's over it, I definitely don't short. Not necessarily wouldn't say I would absolute long it. The other thing to remember about pre-market is certain companies let you trade at different times. So if you have E-Trade, I'll show you on this order entry. So if you want to zoom in on the screen, we're going to be right here. If you wanted to place a extended hours order, you'd have to put in this extended hours. That's pre-market and after hours. So do you see how it says auto extended hours? You'd have to put that in, and you've got to do a limit order. It's not going to let you do a market order. As soon as I switch it to market, it takes it away. So that's the other thing about trading in pre-market is you've got to use limit orders. There are other companies, Lightspeed and some other companies that will let you market order, but E-Trade and these other bigger ones, that's what you have to do. You have to come in here and you have to put in auto extended hours. Now, can anybody tell me when Robinhood, which is the newbie platform, when do they open pre-market trading? 9 a.m., right? So what do you look for oftentimes? This is how I play things, right? And it happens over and over and over and over again. All right. You'll get, as soon as the market opens, let's say it's like 3 a.m. my time, 5 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. What'll happen is, as soon as that pre-market opens, you'll get a pop at like 4 a.m., 7 a.m. You'll get a pop, then it'll sell off, then it'll start to flatten out, and then it'll pop again once Robinhood opens. And so that's what I call the Robinhood push. Okay, they'll chase and they'll cause it to pop. All right. And so they did play this run up. It failed to break pre-market. That's a sign of weakness, right? False breakouts are a sign of weakness. Not enough buyers to maintain the push. I think everybody can see that, right? There's your pre-market break. You wicked up above it and it pulled back down. That's a sign. Hey, a lot of times people chase these right out the gate, and what usually happens? Well, you usually get the profit takers, right? And so these were just lines that I had drawn. I'm going through a high wave candle, broke the high wave candle, took it long, and it broke above VWAP. This is one of my favorites, right? I like the breakdown of VWAP, the reclaim of VWAP, and then to take it long. And so I did that, and actually it was a failed breakout again, and it came back down to a double bottom, and then came back, broke VP line, did not buy, bought the retest, high day break, halt, and this is where it just starts going nuts. Boom, 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 and anyway, that's no reason to really go through that. But eyes is the one that's live today that I wanted to play with you. It's the same thing, right, guys? We're just we start chart reading and we start doing volume, right? So 13 mil volume. Here's 5 million on this one candle, right? Here's 3 million, 6 million. So we've already traded 8 million in the last, so over half of the float has been traded, right? So this is a great example, no overhead, manipulated stock. Wanted to play this one with you, try to capture it, but I thought the lesson would be more important than actually trading it. So Gary, to find stocks in the pre-market, there's a few things that you need to be able to do. And that is find the gappers. You need to identify the news, whether it's fluff or whether it's not fluff, and whether it's going to be able to push via the chart. Now, that example that I gave you on SRNE, so somebody was like, hey, you don't like SRNE today? I forgot what day it was. I think it was this day here. that it was that it PR'd news. Well, SRNE, it was a good pump company through COVID, but SRNE, they are now known for PRing, pumping, and selling into it. They're just a pump and dump. Like no, everybody's been burned by SRNE that has chased SRNE. So how many of you are going to be burned by SRNE again, right? So it's just they're known to pump and dump. This eyes is known for the exact opposite. Short sellers know this. We talked about this morning, and we said, eyes always pushes more than you think it's going to push. So be aware of that. So you get to know companies the more you trade, and you get to know their history, their what they do, and then you get to you get better at seeing bags on the charts, right? So the next spot for bags on this chart is where? Right here, right where we're at, right? This is where anybody that's been trapped up in here is going to be selling into. So this should provide another resistance, right? So I think that answers all the questions. I think I've gone through everything. Just remember the key for anything after hours and pre-market is volume. I often play them as two separate plays. So for example, playing eyes, I would play a pre-market run up, and then I'll get out, and then I'll play it again. So I use it as like two different sections. So I'll play the run up, and then I'll try to catch a dip to play the run up again into the normal hours. So any questions on that? So like that's what I did with snow today. I actually played this run up. I sold out. I tried bouncing it here, and it didn't work. I was hoping they were going to hold this, and it just. How about entries? Where to enter, where to stop, and target? So Gary, that's all going to be determined by technical analysis, right? And timing. The reason I'm up at 3:30 on Monday is because I want to be in as soon as E-Trade lets me trade, which is 4 a.m. Because if there's good news at 4 a.m., you're going to see a spike. So like if it's what happens a lot here, this one takes you a little bit further. What happens a lot is that a lot of people can't trade before 4 a.m. Some can. So you'll see a little spike, and then you'll see a little sell off, and then 4 a.m. hits, and then it pops again because everybody can buy now. Think of it as the same thing as Robinhood, the Robinhood push. So you've got everybody that can buy before E-Trade and everybody else, toss or whatever, and then they push it, right? And then the E-Trade, and then the Robinhood people can push it again. So I like buying like right out the gate at 4:15 to catch the run up, and then sell it, and then try to catch the Robinhood pop. The other thing is when to buy. What happens, Gary, with most people is they want confirmation. You either need to buy quickly or let a chart pattern set up, right? So a lot of people will wait, like they'll wait, and then they're like, okay, it's going to go, and then they buy, and boom, it dumps. You got to be quick, right? So when to buy, where to buy, stop losses and targets like that, that's all going to be based off technical analysis and playing the human psychology, right? So if we start getting under these pre-market lows, everybody's going to be trapped. So that's why they held it. They can't let it go beneath these pre-market lows. Yes, Synthil, most of the time I do. There'll be occasions where I don't. It often depends on what's happening. So, for example, if this were to have pushed into here, I would have sold. If this would have pushed up and then dropped before pre-market open, I would have bought, right? And it's always you're playing the other people. And to be quite frank with you, it's safer to let the first 15 to 30 minutes go by and play after that. I mean, look how much money we could have made just playing from here, right? This thing's going to squeeze. Is anybody playing this eyes? I mean, it's just squeezing the hell out of these shorts. I've already had 2 people cut out for the day because give me 1 sec. I'm going to talk to the short room real quick. I told you guys from the open, this was a long. I told them from the open to long this, and they were fighting it, and I told them not to. So this is a let's do the math on let me pull up dilution tracker. Let's do the math on eyes. Somebody tell me what I call the freedom price. Somebody figure this out for me before I do. Anybody tell me the freedom price on and when I say freedom price, it frees itself from baby shelf. What's the freedom price of let's see if anybody's got it. Anybody get the does anybody know how to figure out the freedom price? Mitzi, you're right. You're right. I wonder if it'll let me short up here. No. So all you do, what limits you? What's the price you have to be over the baby shelf? It's 75 million. So you need to have your IB6 value be over 75 million. So you just take the float, right, and divide it, and that's it. And you come up with about $6. So the question becomes with them, right? Are they going to hold it? It's only 9:30. Are they going to try to hold this above baby shelf so that they can raise? So So let me ask you guys a question. With what we've learned today, can eyes raise, let's say eyes closes at $10 and they're out of baby shelf. Can they raise tomorrow? Everything we've studied on eyes and everything that we know, if eyes closes at $10, can they raise tomorrow? They're out of baby shelf. Dan says if there was an effect form, you're close, Dan. You're close. There has to be something before the effect form. But David, you're right. It's Saturday. On Monday, they could raise, but could they raise The thing is, they don't have an S3 form. They have no shelf. They don't have an active shelf, right? So eyes doesn't even have an active shelf. So what's the process that we have to go through? They have to file for an S3, which they may have already done. They have to file the S3, which they may have already done, and we don't know about it. They can literally do this in one day. They can file the S3, they can get the effect form, and then they can raise, right? But as of now, they don't have a shelf. They have no shelf to raise off of. So this could push into a multi-day squeezer. But if they file the S3, well, what's going to happen? Well, everybody knows that they're going to be in it for the raise, right? All right. So any questions on this? I'm going to stop this recording. If there's no other questions, I don't know what time it is. So, oh, this was kind of long, about an hour and a half. Or, oh, wait, we started a little bit later. Maybe it's about an hour. Here, I'll answer these questions before I stop the recording. When you said, can it raise, do you mean number of shares? When I say, can it raise money? And can eyes, the company, raise money, right? Can they raise money by offering shares? The answer is no, because they don't have a shelf. But they can put in a shelf, get the effect, and then raise money. So through a shelf offering, they can't raise. Can they do a pipe? Can they do something else? Well, they need an S1 and an S1 effect, right? They need some type of effect and raise form to get in there. The only thing they've got right now is $11 warrants that they can raise off of. So does that make sense, Irina? Good training. Okay, good, Dave. I'm glad you liked it. So yeah, we'll watch the video over and over a few times, and you know what, guys? If you want, let's Monday. Let's plan this, guys. Okay. Watch this over the weekend, guys. Monday we'll find one and we'll play it. Okay. Just remind me. But Monday I'm going to be in at 4 a.m. I'll turn on the mic and we'll go through the process. So we've learned it, right? Now I'm going to put it into play on Monday. Efren, they're asking, can you upload this video today? I'll get him to do it ASAP. Let me stop this recording.